and welcome to another episode of The Lifting. Today's conversation was recorded on September 4th, 2023. And today we're going to have a conversation on what we call the line. And so we're going to talk about, review and talk about what we understand our lineages are and how that relates to our individual soul and the soul's development, and also some interesting thoughts that you may have ever even heard of before, all related to things that we have seen throughout probably the last 5 or 6 years, to ponder and to have a discussion with, and to bring people in to have a conversation about those lineage lines. So with that, I'm going to do an affirmation and blessing, then I'll get started. We are all one, and when one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. Therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, that only the highest good be done. I pray for you, your friends, your family, your loved ones, to let healing energies in. Let them love you and nourish you and bring you to your highest good. I pray for myself, for Chris, for our friends and families, to let healing energies in, to love us, to nourish us, to bring us to our highest good. I ask for benevolence to come in, be it those family lineage lines, be it galactics, be it different races out there, friends that have no conflicting agenda, to be able to have this conversation and to hopefully learn something about ourselves and how our family lineage lines operate, and to do so in great peace so that everyone can learn in abundance. I ask for malevolence or mischievous entities to be kind of swept away now, so this conversation can be had easily. I hope you all agree. I hope you can feel the intent of the healing that we wish to help everyone to have. And with that, please just say, so be it.
So be it.
So the interesting thing about this conversation and why we're having it is probably due to a lot of different things that we've talked about or pondered about or may have spoken a bit about throughout all of our conversations. We've touched on bits and pieces that, in fact, there kind of is a line that you may, create with all of your experiences. We've talked about different souls coming together who actually may form somewhat of a grouping, let's say. Think of it as the trees that are all individual trees, but somehow there's a root system that connects all these individuals, and information is gathered. We've said it in the context why so many people may feel they were one person in history. Well, that person in history may have been them, but it also could have been a part of a soul family grouping or whatever. But when the experiences come back, they may be shared so much with all the rest of these soul groupings that it feels like it was your experience, which honestly would be the goal, to make it feel like some of it was your experience. So that can explain why sometimes many people feel they were the same thing, but they could be, again, a part of a larger soul grouping that shares experiences that way. We've talked about, even on a negative side, where you talk about people that have come from a family lineage of not so good things happening to them, more of a darkness creeping in, more of a shared experiences, but more on the harshness of life that seems to run in patterns of these family groupings. We've also talked about the interference of aliens coming in and tinkering with genetics and wanting to also contribute to those family lines, to bring in souls to have certain types of experience within a genome that they have tinkered with. And what does that mean? And to whose advantage is that? So we've talked about kind of all of these different things here and there, but to really come in and have a little bit more of a comprehensive conversation, regarding lineage and lines, and then the current present moment with the soul who's currently in the avatar. Is there any interference or anything that could potentially be going on? We know that there could be alien interference, but what about interference from a line if a soul grouping is trying to steer somebody in a particular direction that may not be what they presently want to happen within that soul's experience? Does that happen? What does that look like if it does? So again, kind of a conversation that's going to just kind of expand from these bits and pieces that we've talked about in the past, just to give you kind of food for thought. But if you're in a family lineage, I will say one of the first clues, not to necessarily an interference, but into the topics that we're talking about, is seeing same patterns emerge that the next generation is also experiencing, and the next generation is also experiencing, and the next generation is also experiencing. You have to question, this is interesting. Why is this kind of going on, that the same pattern of life experience is happening over and over and over again? It could be for some planned reason that actually your soul is very much a part of, or could it be also something where it's, again, how many times does a soul or soul family have to learn something? Is there the thought that we've talked about before about the fact that there could be kind of illness within a line, that people are coming in and trying to purge, let's say, a virus type of thing, or purge something out to keep from these same experiences occurring? Does that actually happen? So we're going to have a nice conversation. I just wanted to kind of start it off with giving just a little bit of context to some of the things we're going to talk about. Chris has got a lot to share, and as well, and we're very interested in hearing the galactic contribution to this.
Yeah, I find this quite interesting, because there have been synchronicities that have popped up over the past several months, and also years, but more recently in the now. Well, you always hear me say, when you think you're done with something, you're not, and the audit always seems to continue. And sometimes it's done when you leave this world. That's not always necessarily true, but in a lot of cases it is. But there are some things you can resolve while you're here. And you've heard spirits say, like when Jeffrey Hunter or when a few others have come through, they said they didn't accomplish everything in spirit that they set out to do. Chadwick Boseman said it as well. So in this, I will make this, I'll say this is interesting. This also popped up in a session today. As a matter of fact, I won't give the details of the person or the name or whomever. But I will say this was a synchronicity tied into, and you heard us end the previous show with, we were thinking of tinkering with this idea. This has to do with familial traits and from side of the family that may have had an agenda to start with. They may even had Orion backing back in the day, or some other alien backing back in the day, or of a lineage curse like jinn backing or demonic backing of some kind. Some of the more satanic sects have problems with that part. But I'm saying there may have been an agreement in the family lineage to be a certain way, or for those souls to bounce around on a particular family line. You've heard me talk about the viruses and the DNA, certain traits that are not needed now that may have been needed then. But that expands into this other conversation. What about those ancestors? What about those ancestors you're always told to call on? This is more of a point of struggle on my part. But what about, the question I asked many months ago was, what about what is the actual wisdom of the ancestors? This is the answer I got back. Sometimes there is. Sometimes you have great wisdom. Sometimes you have a lemon. So this is like with an episode of Fantasy Island I saw years ago, where this one guy was trying to seek the wisdom of like the ancients, or find a ghost that he could find esoteric wisdom from. And Mr. Rourke said, he goes, I could show you 1,000 ghosts, and each and every one of them would be a lemon, because this guy called a ghost he was talking to a lemon. And the guy had a problem, some of his own shadow work he had to deal with before he could cross over, some trauma that he had to deal with. In this particular case, though, we talked about on our Patreon, and I may attach this conversation to this. It's about idyllic afterlives, multiple idyllic afterlives, we called it. And in those situations, there were not only religious groups, but family lineages then and belief systems that formed their own afterlives. And yes, is that linked to the soul trap, soul trade stuff? Yes, but this was more of a specific lineage thing, whereas a particular idea formed an afterlife. Therefore, they felt they had the right to rule their own ethnic group, their own people, certain family lines. And this falls under that category, where I've run into some of my own ancestors, more immediate, that on one side they were in perfect supporting of whatever we do. On the other side, they're extremely traditional and authoritarian. And this is actual, I'm not going to mention the lineage names, mind you, because there might be other people out there that also share in these that aren't necessarily part of this conversation. Just know one was kinder, one was not. And with the traits of the not, they were attempting to, and we found out they were some of the main causes of some of the cursing. I've been finding curses resurface and regurgitating. You've heard in previous episodes, I found some fairy curses going on, alien curses going on, and things, and genetic manipulation. This does not completely fall within that, but yes, it does. These family members were trying so desperately for me to have a child with somebody so that they could continue to bounce on the family line. And I did this in the family line too. I bounced along that particular line, but I was trying something very different. I was attempting to end the garbage. There might be a strain of corruption that the only way you can get rid of it is by allowing it, the cycle to complete and not continue forward past a certain temporal marker in history. And that would be myself right there. Whereas these members were wanting, they were also trying to split us up, knowing that I don't want any children. Of course, she has her own, but they wanted a certain genetic combination with certain barrages of people that anything really that was more of a match. That's more how some of these aliens operate too, by the way, in lineage folding. You see that in Dune, the movie Dune, good example, with alien tampering. But with this was the line self-farming this. This was the line basically stating, we want these traits to survive. That's more of that Nazi authoritarian, hey, we want these traits for our own purposes. In this, it was more the line self-farming traits saying, hey, we want to continue on, but we need a compatible host, let's say. Let's see, when I came into this on a certain side of the family, they said that they would say they would wanted more of people being soldiers, more warriors. Warrior's fine. Warrior has several connotations. This was more like we're going to continue on with a more cornered sector of warrior, like it must be this specific hardened way, it must be this way, must be this way, must be this way. No open palette for anything else inclusive. And when I came along, I was the contrary to that. From day one, I was the contrary from what that side of the family wanted. The other side, perfectly fine. But the two never liked each other. Even in photographs of both of them together, you could tell there were fake smiles there. And I state this because moments ago, before we started this recording, I had to go out and yet again burn more photographs. And some people might be listening to this going, but these are family members. How is that a thing? That's the past. As I've said before, photographs can mark on energy, a moment in time. You don't know the emotions that existed, and you don't know the energies that existed at those exact moments of time. And they could be anchoring you to a moment in time that you don't need to be anchored through the lineage. And just because both sides are represented there, and just because there was a piece, has absolutely no bearing on this. It could be what lies beneath and the intentions beneath that. Fast forward to what I just did. Whenever I go through all this, and I know I'm not done with this, when I burn these things and renounce and revoke all of it, the body goes through this weird catharsis when you are purging one of these viruses in the DNA. And you know it has a weird curse or control factor to it, ancestral curse. When you're purging one of these, the body and the genetics specifically seem to have this weird catharsis where it's mourning almost the death of something. when in fact the soul is rejoicing in the life of something else, and the oversoul is rejoicing in the life of the mantling of now what is the current avatar without some of those viral traits and the best traits itself. Ryan and I called it the mantling and the I am presence here in the moment. That is what was required for this. And I always bitch and complain that I always find things that I have to do this with. And that's true of really anything. And I know I'm not completely done with that. And I kept saying, well, I shouldn't have left Arizona with these things. The notebooks and the CDs fall into this category too. Earlier versions of myself that did not apply to the current moment. And I found this in someone's session today, whereas, he had certain traits that he thought were overbearing, and he did not, he realized he was doing something. I said, you've spotted a virus in the DNA. It was this lineage that was basically saying, hey, we are demanding you do this. So when somebody in a session calls on their sacred ancestors, I always ask them, and I've asked this before I found this out, but I was asking them, I said, do you know who you're calling on? Well, yeah, my family, they couldn't do me wrong. Well, this proves, yes, they can, from even where they are. There could be an aspect of them that was also suffering from this virus in the DNA, and you solve it here, and you solve it for both ends of the lineage. It trickles backwards too. Maybe in their control factor, they're actually crying out for help like a bound being. The oversoul is. Think of it this way. The definition of a bound being is something that's cursed, something that's bound by a darker source, or bound in some fashion, combined maybe even with a darker evil source, and it continues to attack until you unbind it and get rid of whatever garbage, demon, physical or otherwise, attached to it. Like some ghosts need to be bifurcated from certain demons that could represent some of the viruses in the DNA that got attached to from a demonic curse or lineage or jinn curse of some kind. But to get to the point is that this affects that entire lineage. When you sever that, when you're integrating and also parting with, keeping what needs to be kept and parting with what doesn't need to be kept. And you've heard me say this many times over the years, but it is very true about this concept. You're cleansing that. And if you want to continue on, have children, fine. If you don't, fine also. But if you have a lineage out there, especially if you have a father, grandfather, any of those, that their emphasis is very much like that Nietzschean reference in Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, where they were centered around family, lineage, moving their line forward. If they have that, that particular mentality, and also a bit of more of a nuclear family mentality, and they're mixed with that. Man, woman together, this, and you're going against whatever you happen to be. This causes its own set of problems if, they're wanting you to hover within that. Like, say, if you have a parent that wanted you to join the armed forces, but you're more into artistic endeavors and also into energetics. That is the contrary to what previous lineage wanted. Maybe this is now your duty to perform this audit within this particular moment in time. We've said multiple times on JIC, there's one up there that says, you're not the keeper of the flame. And that is true on most accounts. You're not. But within your own audit, you are responsible for your own audit and integrations and purgings. That does not necessarily mean you're the keeper of the flame, as in you're the guardian of the lineage. No, it's your responsibility to get rid of some of those anointed constructs, those anointed keeper of the flame constructs, as well as, you must honor this. You're honoring them all by not allowing what doesn't need to exist in the here and now to exist in the here and now. And if that means cutting loose 9/10 of what you find, or all of what you find, then so be it. If they are truly, in spirit, or truly, wanting to change, then this shouldn't be a problem. But I never thought this was an issue, a complete and utter issue. I knew that our viruses in the DNA were, but I didn't realize how extensive this was to where it's so in life, so in death, that they become their own inclusive, isolated, compartmentalized, idyllic family cluster. And there's soul family, of course, that you've traveled throughout the galactic realms and stuff with omniverse, super omniverse, multiverse, all of it. Then you have this other thing that is not necessarily the same thing, where you have, again, so you have parents, great grandparents, great great grandparents, and they are putting this emphasis on you becoming exactly what they expected their idea of the future to look like. That's not something they have a right to do. Like, say, if you had somebody in colonial times, for instance, that decided they were going to be a trader, business person, and of course, somebody is poking my eye at the moment. Trader, business person, say they wanted to pass this on to their son. And then that person continued on, and then the next continued on. But say that other next generation after that didn't want to do it anymore. Say they wanted to find maybe another heir apparent or sell it. I saw this when I was in Lincoln. There was a business that used to be called P.O. Pears. It doesn't exist anymore. And people were wondering what the hell was wrong with the people that got rid of it after the original owner died. And everybody was scratching their head going, are you kidding me? You didn't keep this around. It was a lucrative business deal. You could have sold it to somebody. What the hell's wrong with you? And simply the answer was, we didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And you don't have the right to dictate this. I know it was something that was cherished by the locals, but we're moving on to something else. We don't have to be like basically the heir apparent to the throne. Essentially, that was essentially the different version of that answer, but that was the answer. And I couldn't agree more, because this is also why I hesitated making anything large myself, because who would be the heir to the throne after I'm gone, sort of thing. And the answer to that is, who cares? Except if it's something in the healing area, you want it to remain with a certain way or protocol. That's a little different. But if it's something that maybe a future generation can add something to, then allow it. Doesn't mean corrupt it. It means evolve it. And it may seem different from what you would expect now. Like, here's a good example. Like, we don't, like, people in this generation may see past generations as, like, say, their music style, for instance, not something we care for. And they see ours as kind of stupid. That's the kind of gap I'm talking about. There might be something more involved, more inclusive, and that another generation might see as foreign. That's the energy vibration that goes into it. It changes and evolves. The point I'm making is you don't kowtow to what the family lineage wanted or wants. You go with true benevolence with no conflicting agendas. And that means in everything. That means in every single aspect. And that you have to look into every corner of this concept, every corner of what is you and isn't you, where is somebody trying to get their own way, where is it something you have to correct in yourself. And in this instance, it was both. So this is where I'm at with this, but the ancestral curse thing is something that is so prevalent. The aliens prey on it. They want people to be of a certain trait, like the Nazis wanted some heartless trait that was in there. And one of the greatest examples I've seen in the game world would be Fallout 4, where you have a child that he becomes lost to you for 60 years because somebody steals him. These people cultivate his ill traits while you're in a 60-year slumber. You come out and you find out that he's in this more Kabbalistic type of trait. He becomes the embodiment of the viruses in the DNA, and you either can choose to take his side or get rid of him. And also, Hitler falls under this category too. He became the embodiment of the viruses in that particular genetic line, showing what the world needed to not allow in themselves. That authoritarian type of practice, either communistic, socialist, or Nazi. So, and there are differences there. People lump them. But what it boils down to is a reflection of what was seeping out of everybody else. One also beautiful trait was Stargate Atlantis, where a group of ancients were on the verge of ascending. I don't buy into the ascension thing, but integration and getting rid of all the junk in the DNA and the energies, yes, the audit, I do. where they were seeing this monster reflecting back at them, but it was a co-creative collective monster, which they think the Slender Man type concept is, but it's not. It's a more of a poltergeist type thing that was reflecting fear back at them. When they acknowledged it was all them, it vanished as a collective, and they left. They were able to ascend. Beautiful example of some of that. But the point I'm making is, don't let your ancestry be the determining factor of what you're doing and who you are in this here and now. Take the things that work, and there are good aspects. There are good warrior aspects that need to come back, ancient knowledge that needs to come back, the wisdom of ancients. But you also have to remember, ancient times was full of crap too. People like to look back on Atlantis for a lot of wisdom. I want to tell you something. Yes, there was way back, and the same thing with them earlier, way back. Once you pass a certain temporal threshold or time frame, it was nothing but shit. Egypt was the same thing. People worship the fairy tale of Egypt. Same thing. That was the origin of the Rothschild family, folks. Rothschild, Roth corrected to Rothschild. It was the Isis and Osiris corrupted lines that created the 13 families. You got to remember that then Hitler also believed that the German people were superior because they came from the genetic lines of Atlantis. He got the butt end of the stick, but there were good things like Odin's line and Ragnar's line that came from that. But those two also made mistakes. You got to remember that. You look at the Viking history. There was a synchronicity that popped up. She had me look at the Vikings Rise and Fall series, where we'll go into this in some of our Viking discussions. But yes, were they the sons of Odin? Yes, but they also there was also a Cabal line that came out of Bjorn Ironside's line. That I can't remember the name offhand of the Cabal family, but it was one of the actual 13 families that came out of this. There's also another well-known one, or partially well-known one, the Merovingian line that came supposedly from the Jesus line or the David line, Solomon line. Look what happened to there. How do you know what the actual intentions were? Bjorn's may have been more good at one point, but then something inverted and something took advantage and created a virus in the DNA. You have also with the David line, how do you know that one was ever good? That one had reptilian woven into it, and you also stem from some of the king line. From there, you have the British king lines of England, and we know, as we've said in that episode about the rundown of the Cabal families of GIC infinitum, we said that is reptilian woven in there. So that's major viruses in the DNA, folks, right there. So I know I've gone on a while, but now
one of the big things to pick up from this is, again, the concept of you don't have to. I'm just going to say, don't think too hard, because again, part of this is about the call for your genuine, sovereign, authentic self to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, if you think about the bigger picture, here you have the micro compared to the macro, which is going on at a different level. And as Chris was saying, what you see in the micro, you see in the macro as well. So if you can imagine a bunch of, let's call them oversouls, that have their tentacles, let's say their avatars, involved in some lineage, collective soul families with other, oversouls that have tentacles into them. And again, very smart decision, because you can run through certain particular genetic type of lines to give you, as the oversoul develops, certain experiences, right, that you want to experience. So you kind of join over here, right, doing all of this stuff that's going on. But again, what is your obligation to it all? And, have you had enough of an experience that it's like, been there, done that.
The soul studied that whole line and already
done that line. You went through that. And is it all bad? No. I mean, in some lines you can see in family lines, they're all, let's say, wonderful mathematicians. They're all great artists. They're all, have these other things they contribute. Not, I know Chris was bringing up some of the harsher stuff, but it's the same thing on any side. The variety of experience. I think, where some of the issues will always lie is when you feel inside of yourself that you're having a personal tug of war within yourself. Because again, as we've said from the very beginning, all of this is really about what do you believe is who you are, and becoming that sovereign, genuine, authentic person, okay, for your experience that you're having right now, which will then, that experience will reflect back. I think a lot of people here now have been here and done it for many, many, many lives. There are still people that are coming in that are doing it for the first time. And I think, again, the wisdom of it all, some people are desperately trying to balance things out that they don't have balance yet. And again, as you're saying, where even, I hate to say it, where even the oversoul can get drunk on something, a stick, get drunk on it and want to experience it. No different than we talked about those beings that wanted to be the antithesis of a gambling addiction. It's almost like really getting stuck in a stick that, maybe they, have you had enough yet? I don't know, maybe I haven't. Let me try this now. Let me do it even more. And you have an oversoul that's stuck, right? And that and they can't, and it can't seem to. And then here comes a little avatar, that basically is like, I think I've had enough, and, starts the process, which again goes to show the importance of the individual experience of the individual avatar, even though there may be hundreds and thousands of you experiencing other things all at the same time, but the importance of the singular, the importance of the one, that you may actually, with your experience, set forth something in motion to a larger picture of yourself that does then help something else snap out of it, let's say, or, no, this is enough. And again, the whole oversoul then gets to look at itself and say, what is my representation of my own greater self? What does that look like? How do I, move forward? And like we said, what you'll tend to find with souls and oversouls that have been doing this for so long now, they do tend to get traits that they feel are representative. And again, the one thing that we've said before is a lot of times, if you could see yourself, you would see a similar face. You would see something similar where certain attributes are, shared in many types of expressions, as the oversoul kind of adding to, this is what I've decided is kind of like me, representative in all my many little avatars that are going on, that these kinds of things can happen. But you'll feel that tug of war, I think, on the inside, and then have to decide. You may feel like you're seeing yourself, I say I'm this, but why am I acting like this, right? You'll see these discrepancies that basically then you need to say,
that denotes a virus in the DNA.
Why am I,
or possession, one of the two.
Why am I saying that I like people and I'm calling them all son of a bitch while I'm driving down the street, right? Do I really mean that? Or
in some cases, yes.
Well, possibly, but I'm just saying, just use a simple example like that, to help people understand that, be who you are, really just be really. And sometimes you are here to be the not so kind person, because you're balancing out. You want to know both sides of a coin. What does it be nice? What does it not to be nice? You have to experience it all. But in general, I think people right now are full of a lot of, let's just say, conflict, and of trying to define who they are and present themselves genuinely. There's been a lot of stuff going on to cause a lot of confusion. There's been a lot of, let's say, reasons why people wouldn't want to state they're, getting punishment from society. And again, I'm thinking, well, obviously a bad person should be punished, but I'm not talking a bad person. I'm talking a good person, a person who says, you know what, I don't feel comfortable doing this. I don't feel comfortable the way this policy is, I don't feel comfortable, whatever. Does that mean you're a bad person just because you don't agree?
Yeah.
In all situations, but is there some sort of now punishment associated with not going along with some people that expect you to go along? I hate to say it, but it's true.
Yeah, and this is something we were able to figure out, some of the stuff that's been happening to us was right from my own lineage, and and heard some of her lineage, and it's just like I didn't really think it ran that deep. Those instructional, more corrupted leanings ran that deep. It's like the example I always use from Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda. This has to do with AIs, but this also has to do with infected oversouls. Beautiful example. Whereas there was this consciousness of this spaceship that had been corrupted over 300 years. Then you had his avatar, which was kind, which was balanced. He falls in love with one of the main characters, Rami, the whole bit. Then he goes back, and Dylan Hunt sees the corrupted AI, sees it, looks it in the face, and he looks at the other one and says, "I think the avatar knew what the core mission was all along." What the core being was all along, even though the main consciousness became corrupted. And no more beautiful example than that, where it's actually flipped from what people expect. They expect the higher self to have total wisdom. What if it became addicted to a particular set of traits, and now within that audit process must then go back to what its modus operandi originally was? We go back, it's called returning to origin point, not necessarily going and absorbing into source and getting rid of everything. It's like in the movie Everywhere Everything All at Once, where the soul had a choice whether to audit or to go away, or the oversoul did, chose an audit. But it didn't mean that certain events in the main character's life weren't still continuing. It was still a process, and you see at the very end of it. But certainly chose for the audit to continue, which meant some of the stuff was still occurring. And I thought there's no more beautiful example than those two I just said for that. But with the line, I never expected it to be this entrenched. I expected, there were maybe some traits I was utilizing that were not good, that were being taken advantage of by darker beings at times. But I never expected that it was a whole side of the family that was basically saying, no, this was our agenda. This was our plan from day one. You participated this, you agreed to this, etc., etc. I said, no, I revoke and renounce. For one, I don't consent to this. 2, and 3, so what? Yeah.
And I even question that because, I think we've also run into situations where you may have agreed to a few things, but did you really agree to the level of now what's
the
going
level
through?
of it's hitting?
And that's why I'm like,
that's
Just,
where the
I
consent thing is BS after a while,
Well,
because
it's
it's over it. Yeah.
you don't know whether, I hate to say it, but there's an agenda going on. So you don't know, did I really agree to all of that?
Chances are you didn't agree to all of the fine
You
print.
know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
you didn't know about all of the fine print, or, again, there just was this, again, the hedge betting. We'll get them in and then we'll be able to steer it this way.
It's
anyway.
it's a micro version of the macro of the hedge betting at the gods concept. That's what it kind of feels like to me, but then it's self-farmed by the lineage, and then you have hedge bettors within the lineage going, well, can you go for this trade or not? It's
Right.
like,
I really wish I could say that I felt like everything was always such 100% required informed consent to everything, but what we've been experiencing is that can be pretty blurred at time, that it is kind of just go in and see what can be done. And, that it may be a little bit more like that, which would be why certain beings were coming in and said, wow, well, I didn't not succeed in my life. Because we're getting to feel like there's like this enormous potential scroll of possibilities, but what is it that actually gets accomplished? So everyone is accomplished. You're going to get some things off the scroll. You're going to do that. Are you going to get everything off the scroll? It doesn't seem that way from what we're showing, but we haven't quite seen too many ones that have crossed over that said nothing was accomplished. But that whole story of coming in with this is the mission, and everyone always gets whatever. It may not be exactly how it all happens. It's just something out there that we're still pondering, but from the experiences that we're seeing and from what we're getting, it's like, we're kind of, as we've been told, very much so, we're really just kind of scratching the surface of the understanding of really how it all works. So we like to start to have some of these conversations to open up just more dialogue about it, which is what we're hoping to happen here as someone comes in to just talk a little bit more about it in a way. And again, bottom line, the importance of you deciding who you are and being your genuine, sovereign, authentic self, which will always add to the, totality of the bigger of you that you are in a positive way. It's that pretty much is going to happen, whether you get everything off the list or not, may not. But the key is to not be vulnerable and not go against your genuine, authentic self, and to not be so manipulated. So the more you can be on track with your genuine, authentic self, the more probably you're going to accomplish off that large scroll that you may have come down with.
Yes, I at this point in time, I feel this, ever since I did that, we have this fire pit outside, and I've noticed that fire and water, earth, air, wind, fire, water, all the elements, natural elements tend to take care of a lot of this junk, especially fire when it comes to this. And you heard me say in the harmful effects of bad intentions, that spell that had to do with basically ice, fire, and cutting within the law of one. You can go back to the end of that episode. I described that spell quite in depth. What I'm trying to say is, what's going on now is there's this weird upheaval and reappropriation of energies. And each time, we leave a device in places or tower buster in place, I feel a weird rotation of reappropriation of energies. If this, it is more of like an implosion to explode. And it is more like this weird shifting, kind of like if you were to deconstruct or reconstruct a house. And the person I was talking to this morning was doing just that and flipping a house. So I told him this was the representation of what was actually going on. It was becoming a money pit because the audit was becoming this constant, almost infinity loop until something was corrected within the lineage. It became that representation. When we were living in Granville, whenever they would build a house or tear down something, I felt the energies change. It's a natural thing within the paranormal circles. You hear about this, but in this sense, same things happened, but within the lineage sense, within that information, and within that energetic sense, it is actually taking place. I can feel this weird ebb and flow, and I know that the task is not done. It does not feel finished to me. And things always change. This is why I've hesitated to write a book about anything, or at least move on with some of that, because sometimes the information evolves, and then the previous works, you end up having to redact some stuff, or you're having to change some stuff or write notations. Eric von Daniken ran into that when he wrote Chariots of Fire, and he'd be the first to admit that. So, and I'm saying that with the From the Fall to the Lifting, like we said before. This is a similar dynamic where the other side of the lineage is there's stuff being severely audited. I can feel that it is not 100%. I'd have to say we're sitting around 70%, maybe 65, 70%, somewhere in there. And I might be being too liberal with my estimate, but I'm trying to find somebody to come in. I would have picked my grandfather, Sainovich, the one that normally has come through on multiple shows. I do feel him there. I don't see a whole lot. I am seeing these weird energy movements. There is some butthurt in this out there. I can definitely feel the butthurt, and it's off that direction. I know directions don't always mean what you think it means, but that's where it's coming from, is that direction. But this, there is some butthurt in this. There is some sadness, and
I think when you release things and like this, you don't have to do it in any sort of anger. It's just a choice. And again, you know, a choice that you make that you feel is for your highest good. And so it doesn't mean disrespect. It does not mean, you know, disrespect for another person's journey and what their soul wanted to learn and how they were in life, or it means none of that. What it just means is just, again, an accounting of yourself and what it is that you wish to experience and or bring to the table. And you know, just simply a letting go of, in this instance, a potential expectation of a line that, again, doesn't serve somebody at the moment. And so just graciously letting it go and allowing even these emotions that you're talking about that you're feeling from whatever, just allowing it to be, and, you know, not feeling shame, blame, or guilt for your decision, not feeling any of these things, just allow it to, you know, be, and again, doing it without necessarily anger or disrespect is probably the best place to be. It puts you in just more of a neutral place, not a judgmental place, just a neutral place to kind of let these energetic changes happen so that a new exploration can begin.
Yeah, and also another thing that I ran into, this was a few sessions ago, a couple months ago, actually, where someone's brother came through. And the parent was holding on to this person's old driver's license. And when I asked why, this person said, "This is all I have of this person." And the person came through. And this is when you know it's true spirit, true afterlife. I say afterlife, but there's really no such thing. It continues, but you know what I'm saying. Not to be too wordsmithy, but he came through and said, "Why do you need that? I'm right here." That's when you have the true ones. When you have aspects that are probably more ghostly or more linked to the human side of things, or ones that are concerned that you're getting rid of some of these photographs, getting concerned that you get rid of some of these things, like how they would have been in life. That's kind of suspicious to me, that there may be a curse involved. This other person basically said, "Get rid of it. Get rid of it. I'm right here." That's from also when they also had pictures of this person from after they had some accident and damaged their brain, and basically said, he goes, "That's not who I was." And this happened to my grandmother on my father's side, who had a stroke, and she wasn't the same, or several strokes, wasn't the same after that. But having pictures of these people when they're in these states can lock that in too. And you don't need to keep that energy around either. That's something to think about even outside of the lineage information. Don't keep something like, if somebody's sick, dying, all that, find ones that they were in a happier state and just back it up to that. Not that you're trying to dismiss what took place, but you remember it, of course, but the physical anchor does not need to exist. Or you're bringing through an aspect or an apparition of that person. After my grandmother on my mother's side died of dementia, there was a fragment of her that wandered around that was kind of bony and creepy looking, and that really wasn't the person. That was more the shade of the person or the wraith of the person, kind of like in the Witcher lore, where there was a trauma, there was the soul, and then what haunted the property was more this creepy skeletal looking wraith. And I have seen that with this lineage curse stuff. I have seen, because I had pictures of my grandmother post-stroke, videos too, that I'm getting rid of, that you had the soul, the oversoul, that of course was getting some of this infection, of course. Then you have this wraith. And it just dawned on me seconds ago that some of these skeletal forms are these wraiths and wraith aspects, like in the Witcher series, that aren't exactly the true core person. This is the unaudited trauma. And okay, validation to that. So this may be, you may be sensing that this is the person, but is it the real one? Or is it an infected version that is also bound and wanting to recreate itself? Or is it something that oversoul enjoys, or aspects enjoy, and they want to stay in it? Who knows? Just know that there was a bullying side that was affecting myself in any of these scenarios. And there was some in the lineage that wanted to stay that way. and wanted to stay within that construct and wanted to bounce around on the family line and stay the same. And God only knows what that would have wrought, in the physical world if I'd had a child there. So I am going to.
Someone has come to my mind,
Hmm.
and obviously if I'm completely wrong, Chris, you're good to clip this section and no one's going to hear it.
Yes.
But there is someone that is strongly coming to my mind who probably has gone through a lot of this and experienced a lot of this, more so than many. I do, I don't know if you want me to just say. I actually feel this may be a good time that Odin comes in, because I feel like he has actually been there, done that a lot. I think he has felt the struggles. I think he has felt the pulls of them trying to pull out of something. I think he's been there, done that a lot. I don't know if you're feeling that.
Yeah, I felt him watching.
That quite strongly that, that may be someone who can share a lot of the personal type of struggles of the, let's just say catching things and then trying to get rid of things, and then those types of issues, and the struggle amongst others that may or may not share the viewpoint.
Okay, yeah, I can feel that. I gotta make sure the energy is clear enough to vet this, but for the moment, and I said this in one of Bjorn's sessions, I use this one currently to have Odin. At some point, he may get his own arc that I can actually more accurately use. But this will do at this moment in time. Tower Buster format's slightly better at it, but this, since it has his or what people consider to be his image here. Wow, that's shaky, but ooh. Okay, yeah, it's you, but you're kind of distant. Can you connect, please? Very strongly, true benevolent Odin, with no conflicting agendas, please. Okay, yeah, that's kind of strong. Okay. What language is being spoken? From, are you present? Huh. Haven't seen you in a while. You're not the one talking, okay? Okay. Haven't seen you in quite some time, actually, but I know that's you. True benevolent Odin with no conflicting agendas. There's somebody out there speaking a different language too. Not too keen on you though. That sounds like reptilian script to me. So get rid of the interference. Okay. Crystal. Yes, smart ass. Just use the crystal. Yes, I know it's a crystal. Stop. Okay. Yes, it is I. But have I contributed to possibly some of this viral influx? Yes, I've had my moments. He's spoken about them often, as I have also in some earlier recordings as well. did I condone, say, the Valhalla entrapment, or did I condone veneration of myself? No. Did I start family lineages? Yeah, I did. Did I start ones that I myself cannot control? They became the embodiments of what that conquest I brought forth did? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They became that which I had also become and thought that it was done. Even in later years, even in the times of Atlantis, let's say, there were, and post Atlantis, there were those days and times that I still could not stop. It's like that character from that Man in the High Castle, the Obergrubenführer, that could not stop, even though he came from good roots. He still had those viruses in the DNA that overcame him. One in the one universe that was the better version that did not access, and then you had the main one that did. That's the conundrum that I too have been struggling with myself and in my later lineages and years. Like smoke without a flame, like body without a soul. These things that had to be done, or I thought had to be done over the years, didn't necessarily need to be. Do I have lineages still functioning out there? Yes. He here has some of mine, as does Bjorn. But there are other lineages that stem from myself that reflected more that which did not need to be. Some of the German history or Hitler history, for instance. Some of the more reptilian traits were cultivated. And that is regrettable. Not to be arrogant. This was regrettable in that sense. Are some of the things occurring to all of you indicative of that lineage curse? Yes, you've come across a wall that doesn't appear like a wall. You've come across a door that does not appear like a door, as Valiant Thor told you. You've come across windows and open sky that appear as dreary and cloudy. You've come across an open sky that doesn't appear that anything but a ceiling made of stone. I say this in Poetic Edda because of the fact that this is how this ebb and flow is. Yes, did some of these viruses come from myself? Yes. And did they have to be resolved in the here and now? Yes. Is this, and I do wish to say this because I became part of this as well, is this current day and age a time of that great change, like what was said and prophesied? Yes and no. There were prophecies like in your Dune, let's say, whereas they were made up by others, just like the lineage folding that was in that. Very, very profoundly written by your Frank Herbert. In this was just exactly how the Evens and Orions do the genetic folding, but are there good lines that have done this very same thing? Yes. Have they merged at times? Uh-huh. And in that merging, what do you think that would end up creating? It would end up creating either embodiments of the old wars and conflicts, very much almost like an allegorical character, or it would be gone forever. This is what you have run into in recent times, even with that other part of his lineage and yours. With his, it stemmed from me. And the one you call the brat, I actually couldn't agree more. Whiner, that one. And the other one that embodies what you know of as the horns, that one wasn't a whiner. He was more of a one with ambition, or superior intellect breeds superior ambition, kind of like a Khan-like figure. In any case, I've had other aspects of my lineage that I'm not always proud of. The sins of the father, in this case, did befall the son. In some cases, no. Like in your artificially bloated CRT crap, that is the artificial version of the sins of the father. The real one is what you're discussing now. The point I'm making is I have made mistakes that was also represented in other shows like your Ancients in Stargate Atlantis being blamed for creating the Wraith, which were reptilians and all that garbage. Yeah, that was true. I did something similar. The point is, I have been running audit the same as you. I did even incarnate an aspect of myself in Scotland as just a simple pub owner. Something simple, something that didn't have the focus that I once had. But I did apply aspects of myself into that in order to bring about a change. Now, I will not name the person, but just know it was a simple existence. It was a happy existence. And I, in that existence, did create more of the embodiment of the line, but in a good aspect. And that particular individual did share also family with himself and Bjorn because of an offshoot lineage. So did I do that in a good way? Yes. There are some that do it in a bad way and get stuck within the infected loop. This is where I can go into questions.
So I find the whole conversation really, really interesting because, again, having a multitude of experiences, being good and being not so good is all part of it. Okay. So it's not about judging, one over the other. I think the important thing about this conversation is, when maybe an oversoul or an avatar offshoot of the oversoul realizes that something needs to change because you could have hit a point of now you're really just circling the toilet, an experience that never seems to want to end. And the DNA has actually kind of solidified itself in a way that it's very difficult to end the cycle. Like I said, family lineages that repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat.
Sometimes death is the answer in that way, or time, not necessarily just death, completing a cycle or ending a lineage because that won't stop. Not that there is an infection in himself or anything like that. It is the fact that the family wanted to continue a certain way that would be seen as circling the toilet. This is why the audit needed to take place.
And again, not to confuse people, because your oversoul yourself doesn't end just because you've taken one experience. I guess the way
It
to
goes
say
back
it,
to the oversoul, yes.
you take one experience to its end, and then you don't allow it to continue as a byproduct of your genetics. Let's say you don't allow. Is that a correct way to say it? I mean, I don't. Again, this isn't about you ending. This is about, taking something that if another soul went into, there's a cycle there that maybe, this or even something that others take such great advantage of.
Life doesn't end.
Yeah. And so there's not necessarily a bad thing to say, we're going to end this kind of show right here and not allow for others to reincarnate through that experience to. Again, the best example I can make of it, again, besides a warring one that never will ever let it end kind of thing, and they'll find another reason and another. But also, I love the one where we use about the embodiment of the addiction of a gambling addiction, that how do you become the embodiment of that? Well, come on, how many times do you have to experience that? There's so much more, basically to experience. I find it interesting. What amazes me is that an aspect of an oversoul, an avatar, can the light bulb can go on, and how that one avatar can do so much for the enormity of itself, for the oversoul, by still having a little bit of something going on up here to want to end something. That fascinates me. It also is an empowering statement to the importance of all the individual little, I guess people would think of themselves as little avatars, but how important you are and how important you can be to figuring something else that is that brings other things maybe into balance for the totality of yourself. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, and to mention those horse-faced ghouls that were in the amusement parks and in your casinos, did they accomplish what they set out to accomplish, becoming the embodiment of an addiction? Short answer is no. Elongated answer was they weren't, how can I put it? They were also an offshoot of something that is exactly what you're speaking about. They were a group of elves that decided that they were going to intentionally fall victim to this, enjoy this, jump around on the same lines. Your Syrian elves of Shasta do something similar, but they are not as dumb as this other ghoulish horseface group, because these guys uncreated their entirety of their race into a finite energy. They de-evolved, as he would say. This is a no-no, de-evolving into a concept. That's an abomination. De-evolving into a concept, going from a concept to a sentient race, as do many millennia of elemental concepts. Yes, races evolve this way. They de-evolved into the very aphrodisiac that they wanted to become, but did they accomplish it the way they thought they would? No, because they de-evolved into a non-sentience. They thought they were going into a concept, whereas they would have still full control as they did. When they de-evolved, they took their sentience with them. They are extinct. Did I have a little bit to do with that? Maybe a little, but because they were getting on my nerves to a certain extent, as did the Dark Elves back in the day. They were a type of one. They may have looked like horse-faced ghouls. It is because they were becoming that when he spotted them the first time. They were really elves. Just like in your Elder Scrolls series, things that were elves morphed into other forms, and even your dwarves uncreated themselves by thinking it was the epitome of intelligence and wisdom and evolution, when in fact it was not. Well, this is a very similar dynamic within certain family lines, where they were trying to keep a certain trait alive, thinking it was so all ungodly important. Just like, here's something you might recognize. Old materials, I'm not mentioning the name per se, old materials that he wants to get a hold of so that he can do the purge himself, can deletion. Then someone else attempting to save what they thought was an importance, thought he had crossed into the dark aspects of life, let's say, or darker side, was going to delete this. Therefore, it must be saved and preserved, thinking that he was the evil and it was the good. No, that person was extremely mistaken, and has their own or her form of dementia type form. But what I'm trying to state is, this was that concept where he thought that he needed to gain mastery over this to purge. And that's not necessarily always true, because that's also what these Tellarian elves actually believed. They had to gain mastery over a concept. Yes, get control of your own image. That's more of a business way of seeing things, and also energetic audit way of seeing things. But it is not always necessary when someone else has fallen victim to something you feel you have to cleanse, if this makes any sense. If it is your own, yes. When it involves others that feel they have to be the keepers of the flame, no.
Well, thank you. And just to clarify, because I want to know who I'm speaking to. So again, part of this conversation is awful hard for us to sometimes have these kind of conversations, because you'd almost want to have it with somebody who was an oversoul at a perspective of an oversoul level. So when I speak to you right now, I am curious, and it can only be from your perception, who are you? Who am I speaking to in relation to the oversoul of which Odin is a part of? Who am I speaking to?
You would be speaking to the Odin, king of Asgard, the one that everybody's, sitting on the throne of that kingdom. I transmit from my main throne room to speak. But my part of a greater oversoul, that is an avatar for? Yes, of course.
So because it's interesting, because again, I don't know if we've ever actually spoken to anything other than even something that feels it's a representative of the oversoul. I don't know if we've ever spoken to
I believe, though, I access this library. I see myself as that, you would say, filtration or vetting system of that. Yes, am I a physical avatar? Yes, it is more of like access to a greater library. Even I can't access all of it because some of it is multiversal. Some of it, people have also asked me if I have duplicates in other universes. I have to say yes to that, but not too many. You'll find with some of the older guard, there was less of that. It's more prevalent in humans now, multiversally. But I have access to that. So, but honestly speaking, am I an avatar like yourself? Yes.
Right. And I think it's important to know that, because the one thing that I think Chris and I have realized over the years is we've had to change from our thought processes of what were black and white truths to change to perspectives. Because like even asking you now, I'm asking you what's your perspective from where you're sitting. It's hard to, again, I think there can be some similar, what we all agree of are kind of good things and not so good things to do to another soul, right? Or to do things like that. But in general, to find the authority, let's say, on all of the truths, it seems more and more that what we find is we get perspectives of conversation.
Perspectives and perceptions of where those particular beings are. At no real time are you going to get 100% clarity. It's going to be by what that perspective of that being is, be they in spirit, be they whatever their belief system is, wherever they came from. They may have a perception that may help you, but it's not going to be the know all and be all. Just like he encountered some reptilian beings once that said they were called the Rangor, and they said they came from a place called the One Universe. There's no such thing. But from their perspective, there was nothing else. Very much like in your Star Trek Voyager, where they met those holographic photonic life forms that were explorers. They could only see the holodeck because that was what they came from, but they could not see the physical flesh world because they did not have the eyes to see that yet, except if it was in their presence, but it seemed hollow to them. Very similar to that other race, but they could know when they were being communicated with, like the Voyager crew and those beings in the holodeck, they could talk to each other. Same difference. You're talking to some beings, but they might not be able to see your outer world. They see theirs, they see you, but they're not going to always see what's around you. Say that's very important because it's their perception, their perspective, and that can change. You can help them open that up, but some of them are explorers like that may be running into a bubble that may seem familiar, but they're not seeing anything outside of the familiar. So you have to get the breadth of the breadth of an entire group and mean average this. Now, like say with Isaac or Elaine and Vesa, they are saying what I would say. They're saying what is in their perception. Things they know aren't true, like what they've been reporting. And his grandfather's same difference. Things they know are not true. Now, it doesn't mean that any of them have the ultimate in perception, neither do I, or perspective. It just is slightly different. I happen to agree with them, like say on the ascension information or on what you guys have been reporting the whole time. It's the same thing. Just because I have a perspective, same with Chrome, he is also here, where he can see snippets of the future and see snippets of things, does not mean there is an ultimate. Lane and Vesa, for instance, they can see snippets from their world within the world. They can see snippets of slightly ahead, not by a lot, more like shimmers in a pond. More like if somebody was looking into a crystal ball, but it's more like a perception. It's not like they're gazing into a crystal or something. It is more like from where their world within world is within the nesting doll. They can see a little bit ahead. They can see what will happen later in a day. And sometimes they'll warn, sometimes it will not, depending on what needs to play out. Sometimes interfering would be bad. Sometimes not interfering would be bad. Just depending on the emotion in the moment, how they feel, how they see. Isaac is the same way. So the forest people can as well. They can see a little bit ahead, but seeing much further ahead is really difficult, and you just get a variety of crap after a while. But if you just jump slightly ahead, you can actually get a feel for what's going on. That's their perspective. I can do the same.
So the reason that I really wanted to bring this up, because obviously it makes, if people are looking for a savior, it may make you a little nervous. You know what I mean? Because really there is nobody that can jump ahead. There
No.
really isn't these things that are out there. So you're wanting something that really can't be, but you need, again, have been told to look for something outside of yourself, but what you need to be doing is looking within yourself. So this is one of those, what we're talking about today, one of those within yourself moments where, again, I'm just going to speak from my understanding of Chris's perspective. So from Chris's perspective, being able to see more than a lot of people, an average person, being able to see further into a few things and to see a really big conflict of who he wishes to identify as himself versus wishes kind of others. I don't know that a lot of people, maybe some, but I don't know of a lot of people right now who themselves have such an internal thing. They may be seeing a little bit of it when you may have a strong family lineage of wanting to be some way or do something, and you're feeling like that's not who you are, then that you could feel it in that way. The reason why I felt that it would be good to hear your perspective in this is that I can't imagine, with as much as you've gone through, that you yourself have not had these moments where you're looking at yourself, you're looking at your soul family, you're looking at the experiences and, basically saying, wow, I'm not in agreement. And then you yourself making a decision to move in a different direction. My curiosity is, well, what happens to the soul family structure? Because again, is it one of those things that you change soul families?
You can, or evolve the circle that you're in. You yourself saw some of the stuff that even in the past I was involved in, and were are very quick to point it out, which you always have. Hence the little pat on the head, but not to rub salt in old wounds. But you can expand on soul family. You can rely on old soul family, but like what was discovered with this, some of those weren't exactly soul family. Some of those were just manipulative lines who had forgotten who they were. And these also, there's a very good, important distinction. There's soul and spirit family, and there's lines that forgot who they were. I fell in between both for a little while, and so did some of my line, and some still remain that way. It doesn't mean those are soul family. Those are just family members that forgot who they were. It doesn't mean that I'd invite them back over to dinner. The brat being one of them. It's unfortunate. Unless, he snapped out of it somewhere, and the other son, I know, will not. So, and there are others, even Neptune, is also one of my children, the one you call Neptune or Poseidon. This is why you were picking up on him. He's actually one of the better ones, but he's had his moments of, let's say, a social nept retardation, let's say, at times, but so have I. So as his father would tell him, he comes by it honestly. But can you change these things? Yes. Your sister is a good example of that. Whereas when she moved on, she said the person she had been with is somebody that she would not have later on. And there's more to that story. I'm not going to put words in her mouth, but you get what I'm saying. But will you always gravitate back toward them? That is the question, isn't it? And that's not necessarily true. Same with soulmate figures and such. You really won't always gravitate back towards them. And there's some of the concept of which you both are blissfully unaware that 9/10 of the concepts don't really exist as you believe them to be, but there are those stronger connections, soul family connections, lover connections, things of that nature that remain and that are good. Not necessarily pure, because sometimes they have some of the worst, as you would say, karmic garbage to work out, but those remain. That love ends up remaining in that. But there are also soul families I've seen torn asunder basically by some things that happen here on Earth that are not reconcilable. I have seen that a million times, and I'll probably see it a million more. So to answer your question, it's actually both.
And it's very interesting because again, people have to be, okay. Again, you're not just going to be letting go of things. Again, the truth is the truth till the new truth comes along. People's foundational beliefs are beginning to change, breaking apart, mourning it, having to move on. But again, the same thing, this being the little micro in the macro world, that, it may not be all that everybody hangs with everybody, and you may come together for an experience, and you may decide that, I don't think I want to have another experience for 10 million years, and it's okay, and it's not bad, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that I don't want to have these conversations. How I feel about this. I like to have these conversations to inform, but not to put people in fear. So again, for those that are ready to have this, to open your mind that it could be a lot more, again, as you're even alluding to.
Sometimes fear can be a teacher as to what to correct and balance too.
No, I agree. I agree with what you're saying. But I guess the fear that what I'm alluding to is the fear to want to learn more. So, the fear to just want to freeze and stop or move backwards or whatever into whatever. I never want to cause anything like that, because I am a person who believes the more knowledge you have, the more potential for control of your life that you have. And we still have to, as you just alluded, Chris and I, as well as others, we still have to undo some teachings that we have learned and heard of, and open ourselves up to a bigger expanse, that there's maybe more to it than we currently understand. And I'm okay with that. Just like, I think for me, when we talk about, the patting on the head and some of my frustrations, I'm sure it's not because of, I do have the understanding that we've done it all. I'm sure when I've gone down the other side, I went for the A++. So that doesn't bother me. I think for me, there is this kind of, we really have to have these conversations and try to work ourselves into having a balanced conversation about who we really are, all of the experiences we go through, what we choose to be representative. Because even if yourself sitting on that throne right now, you've got to have some sort of image of who you actually think you are. Mm-hmm. And so it's important for all of us. I mean, the question is for you, current present moment, where you sit. Do you, are you to a point where you feel that you actually are sovereign and authentic with who you are?
Yes, in this instance, you've seen me over the years trying to conduct some of the audit. I was trying to also shield you from some of the brass influence as well over the years. It doesn't mean that I've been perfect by any way, shape, or form. It's just the difference between both sides of this argument where you have not seen it yet. It's an Enterprise episode with the Klingons, whereas they judge harshly against Archer. It's where you're at in the series currently, whereas one holds to the honor point and the rest hold to more of a political rivalry point. And that's actually, since the Klingons are based off of our people and the Vikings and such, with some Egyptian influence and some foreign influence in there as well, an elven influence and elemental. But the point is, they showed both sides of the argument, whereas one became more politicized, one became more tangible, very much like your data and lore wanted more tangible. One lore wanted more tangible, and data wanted more knowledge. A different story with that. I would say now I'm more like the Klingon character that wanted to adhere more to honor. But this is why I'm bringing out stuff, say about Valhalla, like I did, all of that to show that I do not need nor warrant nor deserve reverence or worship. That is dangerous, as we've said before. Just know that, yes, I'll provide information when needed. I have to tend to my own kingdom and know that I cannot always intervene, as was shown in one of Bjorn's sessions. Whereas I also have, unfortunately, children, one of which is partial reptilian in the New York area, that decided to make himself the self-anointed king of the area. I cannot always interfere with this lest it cause a greater conflict. So no, sometimes you must do things yourself. Sometimes I can assist. It'll be mostly with information, though. Influence I can from time to time, and others you'll find as well. I'm not giving into a yield. This is the wrong choice of words. It is more or less preventing something that was even worse. So just know that there are some other politics and other things that you guys are blissfully unaware of. And it is not necessarily like the old days where it was one ruler, but it is more like multiple factions. Also, there's treaties involved and such and such and such. A lot of paperwork and red tape, as you would call it, that I don't care for. But to put it more bluntly, you are much further than even I got in some of the old times, and that I've gotten. People now, in some aspects, are waking up to this. You yourselves are much further along in this information. I'm not trying to glorify or gloat. I'm just stating I've tried this with others, but they're either in reverence mode, bowing mode, or fearful as to maybe what they've discovered about some of my history, like with the reptilian garbage and everything. They go into fear, and that's not what I want. And what is needed in this is knowing oneself, but also interactions with some of the beings out there is more neutrality. But when it comes to actual evil, you're not bound to any paperwork or red tape. You can actually well and take care of these things where I cannot always. And one could say that is part of the whole GF yield. I don't completely agree. It's more or less not trying to cause an unnecessary conflict. And even as leader of Asgard, I had to deal with factions then that I wasn't too pleased to have to do so. So that's where I am at with that.
So just to bring it back to the subject matter at hand, because what I really want and curious about is your perspective on when a person starts to feel these conflicts, and what your perspective is and advice on how to honor themselves, how to become more sovereign and to honor it. But again, not in a way of being judgmental, but how do you go about doing that to notice it? And then how do you go about it to release things that no longer serve?
Noticing it is what you guys did. Noticing that there was something not quite right. There wasn't something quite right with, say, traits. There wasn't something quite right with lineage and how they would run things. How would you do it? How would they do it? Noticing also, others around you will say you have maybe a stubborn streak or something that needs to be corrected. And that's not always the case, but stating that maybe there's a stagnation in place that doesn't need to be there, or some kind of maybe empty feeling, or what he would call a readiness state, something that you don't know where to go in the next stage of your existence. That means you're in a readiness state, which means it is in the height of these traits wanting to actually dissipate or solidify. Like he said, you can either become it or you can purge it or balance it, integrate properly. So it's in a state where you feel like there's nothing else. That is where it's at its height, at its peak, at its pinnacle. Also, that's also you can tell some alien abductees as well, where they don't feel creative or they aren't actually feeling they have a soul purpose. And you're going to find out more about soul missions than you ever thought. possible. Keep digging into this. This is worthwhile. What people believe about this is not necessarily true. It was also brought up in your Smallville series about how past lives and genetic lineage are the same thing. Somebody brought up past lives, and then somebody thought it was ridiculous and thought it was a genomic set of memories that was coming to Clark at the time. Same difference. Somebody was bringing that disclosure out. What I'm trying to say is, if you are in a readiness state, or where it seems like, how are you going to get to the next stage? Some people call this a midlife crisis. One could say this. One could say, oh, they haven't accomplished what they thought they did. One could say that there's nothing ahead, or feels like there's nothing ahead. You can tell that there is a purge wanting to take place when there are behaviors like this. This is actually one of the more commonly seen, but not necessarily acknowledged a bit of traits.
Well, good. I really appreciate you bringing that through, because I think a lot of people are feeling that now, but I think a lot of people are here to do this.
AI can also cause this as well, but it's only working off of what it has to work with.
Right, but is my sense that this is happening to a lot of people right now? Do you see that from your perspective?
This is happening to millions of people, that they're wanting something else. Eventually, they are going to take that focus, unite it, and get rid of what doesn't serve for the entire planet. When they see truly what is wrong, what needs to be audited, they will see it everywhere. And you will see this is what revolution looks like. They will want the change. They have to become it. Once they've done that, they will see it everywhere else where it needs to be corrected and purged, and you will see it change.
And again, revolution doesn't, and although there may be skirmishes somewhere, revolution does not mean flat and out, we're going to kill everybody.
No, it does not necessarily mean that, and I cannot promise that that doesn't happen. Of course it does. But I'm stating, when people come to that epiphany, you will see it change.
Right. So, we've asked a lot about people's perspective, because again, I don't think what we go through, I think other people go through what we go through. That's why we try to talk about it as well, because I do believe in one form or another, this is happening to a lot of people, the confusion, but the importance, again, of trying to figure out really who you are and bring that forth. But I think, people can see it on small levels, but I agree with you. It's kind of like that matrix, red pill, blue pill. Once you see it, because it's a pattern, it's a pattern of a way of being, a pattern of how things are done. Once you see that pattern, you start to see how it's been integrated everywhere, and it's really can be overwhelming.
And you cannot stop until it's reached its revolution, or resolution, as the case may be, or both in this case. Whereas, I know I've said that word a lot, but in this case, it's both. A revolution is a resolution that's within the self. This means when somebody's reached that readiness state, they know there's something wrong with the world, just like in the Matrix. It's a splinter in your mind. That statement couldn't be any more true than now. When you know something is wrong, your intuition is telling you something isn't right. When you start to deal with that and start to recognize and see more, you're seeing the glitches in the Matrix. When there isn't actually a physical one, folks. There is AI trying to get you to think that, so that you will consent to more of a virtual reality type setting. Oh, we already have it, so therefore, no. You're not in that. You're not on a prison planet either. Do not believe that. These are all Matrix and instilled belief systems. And what I'm trying to say is, when you get to the spot where you know what that whole midlife crisis thing is, know that because you're being worked to death in your life, you're being treated like a slave. You were never meant to be that. You were supposed to be free and sailing on the seven seas like my brethren did. You're supposed to be able to be doing all these things, minus the piracy. But this, that's their own problem. But I'm just saying, I never gave consent to that. But this, not much. But you
love the presence.
Yes, and the camaraderie, and the fact that maybe the church would vanish, maybe, yes. But I was there at least part of the time. But anyway, not that I haven't done piracy myself, but in this instance, the word Viking does mean pirate, as you found out. When people come to the realization that whatever that midlife crisis is a splinter in the mind, it's like a dagger in the heart. This is when people will embrace this feeling because it's their intuitions, their soul basically saying, stupid, the world isn't right, change it. This is what the epiphany people will come to, minus calling themselves stupid. Well, maybe a few of them, but this is where people are at. They're basically wanting help. They want help from an outside source. When they discover that within and they find the resolution, they'll be able to conduct a revolution within and out. They will be able to get basically trim the fat, as it were. And does it mean sometimes maybe skirmishes? Yes, but it doesn't mean that it's an overall world war. No, it just means that it's just behaviors out there that are completely unacceptable, and the world must change shape. This is when you will see it change.
And again, if you're feeling that way, I think the one thing that I always try to really put through is there's been so much effort into get us to not to talk to one another, to realize that there's so
Agree
many,
to disagree.
right, agree to disagree is an important factor, but that you'll find that so many people are going through the same thing. I think I cannot reiterate that enough, that if, there's certain ways that you're feeling are all over the place. Many people are feeling this way, and you're not alone in those feelings. So I think this is probably a great place just to let you have any last comments. And I do appreciate you coming in today.
Yes, head patting aside. This, I know Ragnar was not comfortable doing that, but there's a lot of things he's not been comfortable with. I just do this just to mess with him a little bit, and I do have a sense of humor like that, but this was a serious topic.
No, and patting on the head, what happened through me was this was you saying this is time for this conversation.
Yes.
I actually picked up on that.
Yes. So sometimes people use humor to initiate a good conversation, just like he said, bound beings will attack just to be helped. This was more like humor to kick off the ignition switch of conversation. So this is where I am at with this. Some people thought I've been too wordy as of late in this, and this is not necessarily so. For one, I'm using telepathy. Yes, I know wordsmithing. Two, I use words as magic, and that vibration can change things even within this recording. And three, the time has come to have these conversations. Certain members of my family might actually speak. You may even speak to Neptune, who has a certain head patting moment of his own in this, and some of his children and grandchildren. And this is why you've been encountering the mer people. This is why you become sometimes sad when you see them. There's something that needs resolved. That's also with your Tartarian history as well. I will not go into that. They can speak for themselves, but just know there is something to be said here in a not too distant future from that clan. We do speak often, but this is where I will leave it. All of you, if you have these resolutions to exhibit or make, don't just let yourself be a doormat. If you have to draw the sword to do it, don't think you're so spiritually high and mighty that the blade or the warrior is not the way to go. The reverse of that is also true. Sometimes it can be drawn too much and draw too much blood. An axe can be drawn too much and lob too many heads off, and then there's too much to resolve from that. So you have to find the medium in between, not to make a pun in that because I'm using you as mediums, but in this, just know that there are times that you must exhibit certain emotions like, say, anger, fear, happiness, sadness. It all has to be integrated in balance, not necessarily chopping yourself up from within, going and looking into things you need to do. But if the sword must be drawn, yes, but not in all situations. Sometimes you can dance on the razor's edge and actually accomplish some of the same tasks, even more so. And things do have to change that way. But just know there are times for the sword, there are times for the axe, there is time. For as you say, the pen is mightier than the sword, there are times that none of it is needed. And sometimes the eyes to see are necessary. So, and just observe. And from that observation, you begin to affect change. he says the phrase like two or more walk in my name. Not a good example. My son actually did not say this, but this was some creative writer that said this back in your past your biblical age. Whereas meaning get two or more gather of my name, meaning you can affect change when you start bouncing these things back and forth. It goes up to the oversoul and back and begins the macro micro as above so below magic to change things. This is what I am speaking of. This actually has been taking place later. So thank you. Uh, Okay, yeah, that's interesting. And even Bjorn brought this up. He said Odin's usually not that wordy. He's like the proverbial Boba Fett of the Asgardian world, where he thought Boba Fett was too wordy in the series. So it's kind of like the same comparison. But he was basically stating that now he has things worth saying. He would say, only speak if there's something worth saying, and this is essentially that. So if you're seeing him talk a lot, this is why. So normally that would not be the case. You'd normally have somebody in the background to stand there just like, and he'd say through his presence. Or like that scene from the show Lucifer, where you have a Metadil who normally did things through action, and then when he lost his powers, it was more like he did things through words. Uriel said, "Oh, Metadil at full power would not be that wordy." It's not that kind of situation. It's more like a changing of the guard when it comes to the energies, and therefore he's having to readapt and actually be more of a negotiator rather than just the sword wielder. Yeah, he had to negotiate things in the past, and he even got mad at his bodyguard at one point for trying to, violently throw somebody out of his court. He goes, "No, I needed to be able to negotiate with that tribe." That's when he was starting to negotiate with the Nine Realms versus be the conqueror of the Nine Realms, like what was depicted in Thor Ragnarok. So this has been actually pretty good. I'm actually glad this happened. And yeah, we've had a lot of synchronicities regarding Neptune lately. And being in Virginia Beach, Neptune, it tends to be the deity of choice when it comes to the visions of like the mer people and everything in this area. Even the Neptune statue that's present here that was brought up in 2005 or erected in 2005, the icon of the entire area. So it's actually quite interesting. And I was told that I had him wrong when I thought he was Enlil, like the whole walk on water bit. I thought Poseidon / Neptune was him. I had that totally wrong. I was just picking up on the common lineage. So it's not like James Gilliland's version of where Zeus and Poseidon were Enki and Enlil. I thought that too, but it's not. Enlil is his own separate thing. He's Loki / Jesus / Yahweh. Neptune is someone different. Poseidon, Neptune is different. So I wanted to put that out there. So I think this is a good place that we can close this off. If you wanted to do the last affirmation and blessings.
Yes. Again, as we always say, blessings to everyone out there. We always, always want for you to have your highest good, be sovereign, genuine, and authentic in everything that you do. I hope that you feel the same and will strive to be so. It will make the world a much better place. And I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. We look forward to talking with you again.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. And I am now closing this circle within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.